Hello, guys. Welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast, and welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast for the 100th time. This is so exciting. We are here today, and when I say we, I mean me, solo episoding for episode 100 of the Eat Like Ruby podcast, which is so cool. I am so stoked to be here and to have done 100 episodes, and we've done obviously 100 weekly episodes since the start of last year. So sitting here right now, we are middle to end of November, started the podcast at the start of last year. So weekly eps right up until this point. And that is just awesome because if I do say so myself, but I feel like I see so many people that start a podcast and don't really finish it or don't really stick with it. Or you see people that say like weekly episodes and they do like 3 weeks and then all of a sudden it's not weekly episodes anymore. So to each their own, do what you want. Everyone's got their shit. But I am just so stoked that we, and again, me, have done 100 episodes and I just love it. If you're a regular listener, you'll know I've got plenty to say. We're definitely not slowing down. We're definitely not stopping. But it's just so cool to think about having done 100 episodes. And what I'm going to talk about today for the 100th episode, it's funny because we sort of had a bit of chat in Eat Like Ruby of like, what do we do for the 100th? Like, it can't just be a normal ep. It's got to be a little bit special or a little bit different. And we denied about like, do we do the Eat Like Ruby story or Ruby's story and Ruby's journey and that sort of thing? And part of me was like, yeah, that could be cool. But then I was just really like, it just wasn't vibing that much. I wasn't loving the idea of it that much. And when I really sat with it, I was like, I didn't start this podcast to talk about myself. I started this podcast to help people. And then I thought, 100th ep, what if I just go for the ultimate helpful episode? And that is exactly what I'm going to do today. So warning, it's going to be chatty as fuck. I have so much to say, and I'm probably going to split this in half and make this episode 100 and then 101, so drop the second half next week, because what I want to do today is literally just give all of the advice and thoughts and helpfulness and whatever we want to call it about what I would be doing, thinking about the fact that we are coming up to the end of the year, heading into the festive season, and then staring down the barrel of a whole new year, and really breaking down what I would advise and what I'd be thinking about and the plans and everything I would be putting in place depending on where you're at and where you want to go. And what I really want to look at is like body composition, weight and or like physique goals, fat loss goals, maybe muscle gain goals, but really that focus on body composition and on habits and mindset. I think that is really the juice of the Eat Like Ruby podcast. Obviously, we do different episodes at times about like training or chatty episodes on mindset, performance goals, Shaq's goals. We get Gmod on, like we go in a few different directions, but I think the real juice of the Eat Like Ruby podcast is the educational chat about body composition and achieving our goals with that, and then the mindset and the habits and the conditioning and all that shit that comes along with it. So that's really what I want to speak about today. When I thought about the 100th ep, big ep, I thought I want to bring what I think is my specialty and the real best of the best to this episode and just have people be like, fuck, that was helpful as fuck. I am really thinking about what the rest of this year and especially what 2025 looks like for me with my nutrition, training, physique goals, body composition, weight, fat loss, mindset, habits, all of these things. And I'm going to speak to it in those few different categories. Like we sort of look at people with a bigger weight loss goal, smaller weight loss goal, maybe no weight loss goal, muscle gain, toning, all the things. I'm going to break it down, and hence why I'm feeling like it's going to be a two-parter. There's a lot of categories and there's a lot to say. And the first category or the first thing I want to speak to is people with a big weight loss goal. And if you're a regular listener or you've done the fat loss phase or you've been in Eat Like Ruby, you'll know I speak so much about the fact that we don't just want to look at weight. We want to look at pics, measurements, body composition, all the things, right? But if we think about a person with a big weight loss goal, that is the goal. Weight loss is the goal. If we think about someone that's really quite close to their quote goal weight and doesn't really need to lose weight to be in a healthy weight range, that's where we start to look a little bit more at like pics and measurements and things, because there's not a lot of weight for that person to lose. There's not a lot of big scale drops that are going to happen. We're not going to see that drop really consistently over a long period of time because it's just not there to drop. So that doesn't make sense. But when we bring it to a person that actually needs to lose a fair bit of weight to be in a healthy weight range, and just know, guys, like always, I say that with respect. I'm absolutely going to give you guys some really juicy, helpful chat today. So I don't mean any disrespect, but if you are someone in a position where you know there is quite a big weight loss goal, and I would say with this category I'm going to speak to, we're looking at, like I'm speaking about like 20 plus kilos is the first category I want to look at. Because, and like I said, guys, if this is not you, just know I'm going to work through all the categories today. I'm going to break all this down. And I think there's always crossover. Even if you're in a position where you're like, I definitely don't need to lose 30 kilos. I'm still probably going to say something in this where you're like, oh, that's juicy, that's helpful, whatever. So I would personally advise listening to the whole thing. But I really want to hone in on this category first. And like I said, I'm really speaking about 20 plus kilos. And just know that this could be like 30, 40, 50. You could have 60 kilos to lose, right? So I just want to say, first of all, we get people like this in Eat Like Ruby. I've had a few girls come into Eat Like Ruby and say, I'm literally looking at 45 kilos to go, 50 kilos to go. And that's really what I want to speak about today, because one thing that I'm so mindful of is the fact that I don't fully know what these people feel like and what these people go through. And this is something I think about so much because we get inquiries from people like this. Sometimes I get messages or Gmot will get email inquiries, and it's people sort of being like, I have so much weight to lose. I feel like I have such a big weight loss goal. Is this program for me? Where do I even start? Like, I think it feels, and again, I have to kind of tap into what I think because I don't know, but I think for these people, it feels like this is so big. Where do I even start? Will it even work? I think it's just quite a lost energy, and rightly so. And what I was getting at there is I am so mindful of the fact that I will never know what this feels like. And I always try, I think, especially as I've been in business a long time and as I've matured as well through that time, I really try and stop for a second and think, how is this person feeling? What is this person going through? And like I said, I'm never going to know that for sure, because one thing that's literally crossed my mind, I'm not even kidding, and like I say, guys, chatty episode today, strap in, but one thing that has crossed my mind is like literally doing an experiment where I put on a ton of weight and then get it off. And like I've honestly considered doing this because I was like, would it be a cool thing to do for people to watch? Like, how does Ruby get this off? But then also for me to experience what is it like to really carry excess weight and what does that feel like? But even if I was to do that, I would never truly be able to relate to a person that feels like they don't know what to do. Because even if you think about me putting myself through an experiment where I put on a fair bit of weight and then aim to get it off, there would still be a real underlying thing for me of like, I know how to get this off. And this is actually part of a plan and I know what I'm doing. And even though there would obviously be some discomfort and whatever, I would never experience that same level of uncertainty and desperation that a person who is carrying that weight and doesn't know how to get it off experiences. So little bit of a rant, little bit of a side note, but just know that this is something that goes through my mind all the time. And when I see these messages or these comments or anything from these people, I really try and stop for a second and think, what is it like for this person? Like, what is the feeling, the physical feeling, the mental, the emotional? Like, there's so much that comes with that. And that's why I wanted to speak to it today, because I think, like I said before, I think for women in this position, and obviously I know men can be in this position too, but I work predominantly with women. I speak to women about this, so I am going to speak to it in terms of it being a woman on the receiving end. When I see these comments or I see these people reach out, I really just try and stop for a second and think like, what does it physically feel like to carry that weight? And then what is the mindset and the emotion and everything that's coming with that? And how do we, it's such a sweet spot. And with coaching anyone and educating anyone, it's such a sweet spot of recognizing the person and what they're going through and how they're feeling, but not just validating it and letting them sit in it. If somebody comes forward and they're like, I'm carrying all this excess weight, I feel a certain way, I feel like this, etc. if we just come in and go, oh my God, you poor thing, like I can only imagine how that feels, that can feel great for a moment to validate somebody, but it's not helpful in the long term. But then at the same time, if we just come in with like, well, this is all you got to do about it. There's the plan. It's not that hard. Then that's not helpful either, because the person can feel like, fuck, she doesn't get it. So I'm so mindful of that sweet spot where it's like, yes, we can see you and we can recognize you and we can somewhat validate what you're going through, but then how do we pull you forward? How do we actually start to get you moving away from that? So that's really where my mind goes when I see these things come forward. And one of the first things, 20 minutes in, like always, one of the first things I see with these people is, I think, or like people in this position, is the mindset and the thoughts of like, will this work for me? And I think, let's say somebody's considering doing the fat loss phase as an example, and they feel like they've got a lot of weight to lose, and there's just this underlying feeling of like, but will this actually work for me? I think this feeling is so valid if you are someone in this position who feels like you've tried a lot of things and potentially failed at a lot of things. If you've got a big history of trying and failing, it absolutely makes sense that you're apprehensive to join something else or do something else. And you've got a lot of subconscious or maybe conscious thoughts and feelings of like, is this really going to work? Because nothing works. So there's often a level of apprehension there. And I just want to recognize that and acknowledge that it makes so much sense that you feel that way. So if you're in a position where you feel like you've got a lot of weight to lose and you're just wondering, will fucking anything work for me? Just know that it makes so much sense that you're feeling that way. But I truly believe, as an educated professional and as someone that's helped a lot of women lose a lot of weight, yes, shit can work for you. If you can find the right thing, you can absolutely shift this if you find the right thing, if you do the work, and if you get it going. But it absolutely makes sense that you're feeling the way you're feeling. And the second thing that I see with these people, I think it's so common and I just want to point out, guys, I can hear myself saying these people, and I feel like I'm saying that in like a weird kind of categorizing way. It's just flying out my mouth. So I don't want to like say that in a weird way, but with people in this position, it's a better way of saying it, we see that initial like apprehension, I don't think this will work for me kind of thing. And if we can work through that and we can actually step across the line, join the fat loss phase, get shit moving, this is really fucking cool, by the way. Like, this is awesome. I've seen this a lot and it's wicked. But it has to start. Like, you have to initiate that process and you have to go, like, I've got to actually try. If I want to find out if this works for me, I've got to actually try. But that's not even the point I'm trying to make here. The second thing I see when people are in this position is they do come in, shit does start to work for them, and then we get this underlying thing of like, I wish it would work quicker. I wish it would work faster. And I feel like, again, I want to acknowledge that in a perfect world, it would, and I can absolutely understand why you would feel that way. And I think anyone that goes into working towards any goal is like, in a perfect world, I would click my fingers and get there a lot sooner, right? And I think it's very common when we're in this position. And I think what's happening here is it's such a big goal. It seems so big and so grand and almost somewhat overwhelming. And if you think about being in a position where you've got, let's say, 45 kilos to lose, and you're chipping away losing 700 to 800 grams a week, maybe a kilo a week, let's just say for ease of maths, you're probably sitting there going, fuck, I've got 45 weeks to go. And then I think what can happen as well is, obviously, like I said, we get the ball rolling and we start to chip away and we see some weight loss and some shifts happening, and that's awesome. But then we also have the ups and downs and the trial and error and everything I speak about. And you might have those weeks where nothing happens. And then again, I think we find ourselves in that position of being like, fuck, it already feels so big and grand and far away. Any week where I feel like, quote, nothing moves or I don't make progress is just extending this whole process for me even more. So the reason I'm talking about this is because I'll actually be really honest. Somebody came, like I said, we've had a fair few girls come through the fat loss phase and lose big amounts of weights like this. It's awesome. I've actually got a few girls coming on the podcast in the next few weeks that have had wicked progress in the fat loss phase in this sense. So that is awesome. But I had somebody come in recently in the final round of 2024, and she actually said her wording was so cool. It kind of made me think about this stuff a little bit more. She was like, thank you so much for all the education in the modules. I feel so seen. And I was like, fuck, that's so interesting and so cool for me to hear, because with the fat loss phase, we literally welcome people that have 2 kilos to lose and people that have 52 kilos to lose. But it's very hard as a coach to try and speak to both. And I feel like I do a very good job of it. And I really do try my best to be like, if you're in this position, do this. If you're in this position, do this. And again, that's the reason I'm doing this podcast right now. But to see someone come in and she said, I feel like I've got 40, 50 kilos to go, but this has been so helpful and I just feel so understood and so seen. And that was just really cool for me to kind of see that comment, because it made me realize that so often these people don't feel seen and don't feel understood. And that's something that I've been aware of. Like I said, I'm really trying to tap into that. But just seeing that comment was like, yeah, this person probably has been through things where she's just felt like there's probably a super fitspo coach on the other end who doesn't really get what it's truly like for her. So it's really cool for me to just kind of see that and keep being reminded that there are people in a very different position to me and feeling a way that I've never felt and will probably never feel. It's always just cool. As much as that person might be feeling a bit lost, there's a bit of a silver lining there where I'm like, oh, there's so much that I can learn here as a coach, which is really cool. And what I was getting at there is when someone does have a goal that feels so big and so far away, we can really have that feeling of like, how and where do I even start? Will it even work if I have had quite a history, especially of feeling like I've tried and failed? And then B, even when I do get it working, and if you were in the final round of the fat loss phase, I think this is a really common thing, because that was such a big round and we had a lot of girls that were in there for the first time, and they do get the ball rolling with a bit of fat loss. But then they've obviously come out of that now and they're going to keep chipping away on their own, which is awesome. But I think some days we can sort of sink back into that feeling of like, fuck, I've still got so far to go. So I just want to acknowledge that that's such a common thing I see. First of all, like, will it work? Then even when it does work and we do get the ball rolling, being like, okay, cool, yeah, it is working, but fuck, this is going to be a big, long process for me. And the thing I really want to say here, and I want to start to sort of get into the advice and the plans and the protocols for these people, but the reason I wanted to say all that stuff is to just really acknowledge that I know people are in this position and you absolutely can change this if you come in and you do the work, is really what I wanted to point out there. But if you're in this position and you're thinking like, either A, I haven't really found the thing that works for me, like where the fuck do I even start? Or B, I have just started and kind of got the ball rolling, but fuck, I've got a long way to go. I would be looking at 2025 as a whole, like what I really think needs to happen here. And what we have to remember here is like, what is the alternative? And this is where, like I said, I think there's a sweet spot of acknowledging the position people are in and validating it a little bit, but then being like, okay, cool, what are we doing about it? Right here, right now, guys, this is what we're doing about it. As much as you might wish it was different, as much as you might want to click your fingers and wish that you could speed up the process, it is what it is. You've got 2 options. Fuck around, twiddle your thumbs and feel this way in 12 months' time, or look at 2025 as a whole and go, what am I going to do with this 12 months? Don't think about what am I going to weigh tomorrow? What is, like, how quickly can I get there? Am I going to hit my goal by next week? Am I going to hit my goal by next month or whatever? Drop that like short, sharp, quick fix mindset mentality. Look at 2025 as a whole and go, where would I love to be coming into the festive season this time next year? Give yourself 12 months, because if we do have this big goal, it is going to take time. And again, if we don't like hearing that, really think about what is the alternative. We can use this 12 months to our advantage or we cannot. It's really that simple, and it's completely up to you to decide. But if you are someone who is deciding, yep, okay, I'm going to use this 12 months to my advantage, there's a few little things I would advise here. Well, they're big things, but they're just things. What I would advise here is you want to find your deficit. If you've been in Eat Like Ruby, if you've been in the fat loss phase, you should know this, you should start to have an idea, and you should know what this looks like. If you have not, or you don't even really know what deficit means, you don't really understand this stuff, I would absolutely advise, my number one piece of advice is to learn enough, whether you actually join the Eat Like Ruby fat loss phase, whether you join something else, whether you just binge the podcast, do whatever you have to do to truly understand what is required of you to achieve fat loss. Don't, like I've said this in a million ways on the podcast before, but I'm going to say it again. Don't just quote hope that things work in your favor. Don't go into something with a really vague sort of loose plan of like, oh, just try and quote eat good. Well, you want to know what eating good means for you and your goal. You want to know exactly what is required for you to achieve your goal, and your goal being quite a big weight loss goal. And this is where we've got some crossover, because even if you have a small weight loss goal, that's still the thing I would advise. You want to know for sure, if you're going into 2025 going, yep, I'm going to use this year to my advantage, I'm going to do the fucking work, I'm going to move forward. You want to know that what you're doing is actually going to move you forward. If we think about all those plans I just said where people are like, oh, just eat well, oh, just eat good. If you don't know for sure what actually eating good means for you and your goal, you could find yourself spinning your wheels for months and being like, I've been trying to be good and I'm not getting anywhere. You don't want to fucking not get anywhere. You want to get somewhere. I see you. I know you want to get somewhere. So the number one thing you need to do is work out your deficit and know what is required of you to achieve fat loss and weight loss. And side note, guys, I'm never going to tell anyone what to do, even though it sounds like I've just absolutely been telling people what to do for the last 20 minutes. But if you don't want to lose weight, if you don't want to do a fat loss phase, if you don't want to do a deficit, whatever, you don't have to. But I'm speaking with the assumption that anyone here wants to work on these things. So I'm just going to make that assumption, and we're going to speak about if you actually want to work on this shit, this is what I would advise. If you don't want to work on it, that's totally fine. I'd probably tap out now though, because I'm going to give you a lot more advice. But the other thing to think about here is if you're in this position where you've got the bigger weight loss goal and you know your deficit, maybe you've been in Eat Like Ruby for a while, maybe you've been doing your own thing for a while, whatever it is, if you've found your deficit, you know what's required of you to achieve fat loss and you've been chipping away. I think it's really common. I see this a lot. So if you can relate to this, you're definitely not alone. I think it's really common to get to this time of year and feel a little bit exhausted by the whole thing. And again, just fully acknowledging if you're feeling a bit exhausted from dieting all year, I see you. I feel you. And this is something I really want people to think about. We spoke about this a few weeks ago with the fucket mode masterclass and talking about like dieting into the festive season. If you think about someone really grinding through a diet all year, we are now like 48 weeks into the year. That's a long time to bust your ass at something. And it's awesome. I want to applaud anyone that has been putting in the work this year and feels like, fuck, I've been trying really hard all year. That is fucking awesome. Whatever your goal is, whatever you've been working on, if you've been working hard this year, amen. Big yes from me. But what we want to look at here is if you feel this way and you can feel the physical effects of this in terms of like hunger, low energy, cravings, maybe you're a little bit moody, you're just a little bit like fucking over this, right? It makes sense. And then that sort of ties into mentally and emotionally being a bit exhausted by it as well. Again, if you just feel like you're a bit moody and you're just a bit like, I'm fucking done with this. It's almost like if you've worked all year and you haven't had a holiday and you know your Christmas holiday is coming and you're just like, fuck, I can't wait. I can't wait to just chill. It absolutely makes sense that we feel the same way with dieting. If you've been grinding and doing the work, it makes sense that you've hit a bit of a wall. This is really something to look at. And what I mean by this is I think so often when there's a big weight loss goal, people don't want to look at this and don't want to acknowledge this because they don't want to slow down progress towards that goal. And what I mean is, if you're someone who's been trying all year, whether you've been trying and succeeding or whether you've been trying and failing, that's irrelevant right now. All we want to look at is if you've been trying and you're feeling a little bit exhausted, this is where it can be so beneficial to really recognize this and accept it and make a decision to have a bit of a diet break and go to maintenance. And if you don't know what that means, go back and listen to the pod, join the fat loss phase, do whatever you got to do. But if we think about a person that has been grinding all year, like I said, whether you've been succeeding or failing, but you've been doing the work, you're at a point where you're feeling quite exhausted. If you're looking at 2025 and going, yep, I'm willing to keep doing the work, I really want to have a great year, I want to make the most of it, we want to go into that year feeling pumped, refreshed, motivated, ready to get after it. If you're feeling exhausted right now and you keep trying to implement the same shit that's been making you feel exhausted for the last few weeks or months, how are you going to feel at the start of the new year? And this is such an important thing to catch. And it comes back to what I was just saying. So often when we say to someone in a position where there's a lot of weight to lose, I would suggest having a diet break or spending some time at maintenance. We can really dig in our heels or put up that wall and go, I don't want to go to maintenance. I don't want to have a diet break because I don't want to stand still or put a halt on my progress, because I do want to keep making progress and I do want to keep moving forward. If we think about having a diet break or sitting at maintenance for the whole of December, let's say that's 5 weeks. For a lot of people in this position, there is that thing in your mind where you're like, I don't want to use 5 weeks that way. I want to use 5 weeks to my advantage and keep moving forward. But this is where it is so important to really let that go for a second and just ask, but how am I truly feeling? If you're feeling positive, motivated, pumped, fresh, excited, and you know that you can actually really keep implementing your deficit and your fat loss phase, absolutely do so. Go for it. Go off. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do, like I said, even though I'm going to keep telling everyone what to do. But think about everything we really spoke about with that fucket mode masterclass. And if you haven't listened to that, it should be like 1 or 2 episodes ago. You'll see it on the pod. But we really spoke about a person that goes through the festive season digging in their heels and trying to implement a diet that they can't really stick to because it is the festive season and there's so much else happening. It's hard to implement a strict diet. If we also think about that person already feeling exhausted, they then spend 5 weeks trying to do something that's really hard to do. Obviously, that exhaustion is going to keep accumulating. Then, like I said, we find ourselves coming into January when it would actually be a really beneficial time to diet. And you're like, I'm fucked. I'm done. I've just spent all year working my ass off. I've then just tried to implement something through December that didn't really work for me. So that was a real grind as well. And that's pissed me off and I'm not feeling good about that. And now I'm coming into the new year feeling quite exhausted already. This is where, like I was saying, we want to bring it back to really thinking about how you're feeling right now and thinking, would it be beneficial for me to have a little bit of a diet break, spend a bit of time at maintenance, just literally reduce all of the negative side effects that have come from trying to diet? Like I said, maybe successfully, maybe unsuccessfully this year. And what I mean by that is if you're sitting there right now thinking, yeah, energy is a bit shit, cravings are definitely there, hunger's there, bit moody, bit over it, bit all of those things I keep saying, really becoming aware of that and thinking, am I in that position right now? Would I benefit from spending some time with a bit more flexible approach in place, a bit more loose, a little bit less restriction, physically give my body that break and give it a little bit more food, mentally and emotionally give myself the break. Like I said before, it's almost like having a bit of a holiday, having that downtime from dieting so that then when we come out into January, you're like, okay, cool. I feel refreshed. I feel like I've had a break and I can go for it. This is absolutely something I think everyone should think about, but especially people in that position where there is a big weight loss goal, because like I said, so often we can instantly go, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want to spend time standing still. I want to keep moving forward. Really ask yourself, do I think I will move forward in December or whatever timeframe we're looking at? Based on everything that we said just now, everything that we said in that fuck it mode call, if you really consider all those things, do you think you're going to move forward in that time? If you do, awesome, go for it. If you don't, do you need to implement that break? And this comes back to what I said before. Stop thinking short term, stop thinking quick fix, and more so think, where do I want to be this time next year? Do I need to stand still for a second, have the diet break, have that bit of a chill time to then arrive in January feeling very different, very positive, very excited, and make the most of 2025. The last little thing I say about this, guys, I could talk about this all day because I feel like it's so hard to get this message across. But if we're really thinking about where do I want to be in 12 months' time, think about this next 5 weeks as almost the primer for that. How can I prime myself to then fucking go for it in January? Can I implement some patience and not feel like I've got to fucking go for it right now because I've been going for it for months, if not years? Do I stop for a second, enjoy December, let everything come down a little bit, and then arrive in January ready to fucking go and make the most of 2025? If you're picking up what I'm putting down and you're willing to do this, If you're a person who knows your deficit, you know flexible dieting, and you know all these things, all I would do is just spend December at maintenance. I would implement good habits every day. I would still eat enough protein, fruit, veggies, fiber, all those things, but I would just increase the intake to maintenance. With any event, occasion, anything at all, go into that with moderation, mindfulness, maturity. If you're in Eat Like Ruby, we've done enjoying meals out. You know how to handle these things. If you're not in Eat Like Ruby, have a listen to Fucket Mode. We spoke about it a lot in there. Go into any event and occasion implementing all those things. Any other day that you can just tick the boxes and implement good nutrition with fruit, veggies, fiber, protein, all those things, but do so on a higher intake, on your maintenance intake, so you can physically relieve things like energy, hunger, and cravings, and you can mentally and emotionally just feel like, oh, this is a bit more enjoyable because I'm not on a restrictive diet. Again, get to January, knuckle down in your fat loss phase when you're ready, fucking go for it. If you do not know your deficit or flexible dieting or all those things, I would use December as a time to simply start playing around with those things. Download MyFitnessPal, binge the Eat Like Ruby podcast, do whatever you've got to do to just get a basic understanding of fat loss, calories, deficit, all these things. Start playing around with tracking food, being mindful of how much protein you eat. Can I get a bit more fruit and veg? All those things. But don't put any crazy restriction in place. Use that as your trial and error time. So often when people get started in Eat Like Ruby, we need a phase of trial and error. And it makes sense. If you've never done this thing before, you have to be okay with a little bit of trial and error. Use December as your trial and error. This is so perfect because if you then get to January and you're like, oh, I've actually now got a little bit of an understanding of calories and MyFitnessPal, and I'm starting to learn what foods have protein in them, and I'm starting to work towards my fiber intake. That is such a fucking wicked head start to then get to January and be like, okay, cool. I've gathered that little bit of base knowledge, that little bit of understanding. I've also enjoyed the festive season, and now I'm in January. I can really knuckle down, tighten things up, and I've got that little head start under my belt as well. That is so awesome. I think that is such a wicked way to navigate things. And again, it comes back to looking at the year as a whole, because some people would look at that and go, well, then I won't achieve anything in the next 5 weeks. You might not achieve anything with fat loss or scale weight, but you are building habits, building education that is absolutely going to help you and serve you achieving the long-term goal to get to where you want to be this time next year. So again, stop thinking about a quick fix, summer shred, all of these things, and think, fuck, I've been dealing with this shit for years. It hasn't been fucking working for me. It's time to do it differently. This is how I'm going to do it differently. December is my trial and error, my head start. Then I come into January. I've got a little bit of understanding. I've got some good habits. I can refine them and I can absolutely get after it in 2025. That would be my advice for people in a position with a big weight loss goal. I would then be looking, and I'm going to speak about this a little bit more in the new year as well. So just know that we'll sort of come back to it and give a bit more advice in January. But what I would be thinking about as a loose plan is using December that way, working out when would it suit you to actually tighten things up a little bit more. Like I said, if you've got the experience and you know your deficit and everything, really just deciding when would I actually go back into that deficit. If you're a beginner who is practicing all these things, when would I then tighten things up and take it to that next step and that next level? And really what I'd be looking at when making that decision of when you do that is, when does it suit me and my schedule and my lifestyle in January or in the new year? Most people have sort of that week where life returns to normal. If we think about Christmas, New Year, holidays, festive season, maybe you go away, camping, interstate, anything like that. For most people, there's a disruption to routine. For some people, it's for a few days. For some people, it's for a few months. So this is going to be different from person to person, but you just want to have a look at your schedule and go, when does shit really just settle down and get back to routine for me? That is when I will tighten things up, implement my deficit, and really start to get after it. That's exactly what I would be lining up if I was the person with a big weight loss goal over the next few months. And if you are in the position where you do have a big weight loss goal, like we've been speaking to, you're probably looking at spending most of 2025 in a deficit. And really, like I said, we'll definitely speak about this more in 2025, and you've probably heard me talk about it in different ways before. But when we're in a position where we need to lose weight to reach a healthy weight range, I really advise having the deficit in place anytime you feel like you can with your routine, your schedule, and your lifestyle, and anytime you physically feel like you can, when things like hunger, energy, cravings, everything like I've been rattling off, are feeling quite good. And what I mean by that is if we look at the year as a whole, you might have, let's say, 52 weeks in a year. You might have a really busy December, like we've been saying, so you decide that that probably won't be spent in an aggressive deficit. You might have a 2-week holiday in the middle of the year. That's not going to be a deficit either. You might do something for Easter, so you think, yep, that's a good time to have a diet break. And then you might just have a couple of other things that pop up through the year where you go, I'm going to go to maintenance for the week. Let's say, and when we say go to maintenance, that's really like having a diet break, right? Let's say as a whole, there's 8 to 10 weeks of the year where you are in diet break mode or you're in maintenance mode or things are a little bit more chilled. If we do the maths on that, you're looking at 42 to 44 weeks of the year in an effective deficit. That's fucking awesome. And if we can be okay with implementing diet breaks and going to maintenance and doing all this stuff I'm saying, usually we find ourselves in a position where the deficits can be a lot more successful because we know that the breaks are coming or the shifts are coming, or we've got that ability to pivot on the diet anytime we need to and actually implement a diet break, maintenance, etc. So what I'm getting at is, like I said, you're probably looking at most of 2025 being in a deficit and working towards fat loss until you reach a healthy weight range, which is awesome. If we think about going into a deficit and knuckling down and tighten things up at some point in January when it suits you to do so, you're probably then looking at 10 to 12-ish weeks of really getting after it, and then possibly considering the diet break around Easter, which is perfect timing. I think this is so perfect. And there's so many Eat Like Ruby girls that do this every year, like that real intentional fat loss phase through Jan, Feb, March, and then a couple of weeks of things being a bit more chilled, diet break, maintenance, etc. around Easter. And then we can reassess as we head into winter. Okay, cool. What does my schedule look like for May and June? Things are pretty clear. Things are good. I obviously want to keep chipping away at weight loss and fat loss. I'll knuckle back down in the deficit. And then, like I said, again, you might have a 2-week holiday in winter. You might be someone that's going to Europe, go off, whatever you've got going on. You can start to formulate a bit of a plan. And it doesn't have to be super strict of like, on this day I'll go to maintenance and on this day I'll go back to my deficit. But if you kind of look at your year as a whole, and you might not have your whole holidays and schedule and everything planned out for the year, which is totally fine, but anything you do have planned out or anything you do know about, you can kind of start to formulate that loose plan in your mind of being like, okay, cool, chill a little bit through December, knuckle back down in Jan, whatever week suits me. Few really solid, successful months in the deficit, Jan, Feb, March. As we start to come into April, we're looking at Easter. Side note, Easter's a bit later this year. I think it's around the 20th of April in 2025. So again, this is when we start to sort of see long weekends, school holidays, all that sort of thing. And it's a little bit different from person to person, but if you're someone who's got school holidays and shit like that, that can be such a perfect time. If you've just done 3 solid months in a deficit, perfect time to have a 2-week diet break, bit more flexible, few more calories up your sleeve to enjoy the school holidays and Easter. Again, we work with it, not against it, exactly like I've just said for the festive season. Then we come out the other side of Easter, we're in the end of April now, and we go, yep, okay, cool. May and June looking pretty sweet. Life's good. Let's get back in that deficit. Let's go. Again, we're feeling quite pumped, positive, refreshed, motivated because we've implemented the intentional diet break, physically, mentally, emotionally relieve the symptoms of being in that grind and being in the deficit. We knuckle back down into it for a few more months. Maybe you make another assessment when the next lot of school holidays come or your next holiday or something comes around July, August. Maybe there's no holiday, maybe there's no nothing at all, but you just go, yep, fuck, I've just done another solid 2 to 3 months. I'm going to have another 2 to 3 week diet break. And then we usually find it's a really common time to knuckle down on fat loss again through like August, September, October before we start to come into the festive season again. And that's exactly why I want to have this conversation right now. And that's exactly why I'm telling people to get out of that quick fix energy. Look at the year as a whole. Imagine if that was your year. If you're a person sitting there right now going, I've got 30, 40 or 50 kilos to lose. I feel overwhelmed. It feels big. I don't know where to start. That is where I would start. I would take the pressure off yourself for December and be like, I'm stepping away from quick fix energy. As much as I would fucking love to achieve this now, we can acknowledge that people would love to achieve this now. We're not going to achieve 50 kilo weight loss in 4 weeks. We're just not. Okay. Let's let that go and really think, okay, I am in this position. It is what it is. Where would I love to be next year? Going to chill a bit for December. Going to fucking get after it Jan, Feb, March. Going to implement a diet break whenever I need to. Going to get after it again through the winter. Maybe another diet break. Going to send it through that back half of next year as I come into summer again. Imagine where I will be when we get to November next year. I'm pausing for effect. I'm pausing for people to just take that in and really think about how beneficial that can be if you are in this position, but you have to be willing to let the guard down, let the wall down and go, fuck, I've got some work to do, but I'm going to commit the year to doing that work. Imagine where I will be in 12 months' time. Big yes from me. And the last little thing I'll say, guys, I'm going to wrap up this episode and then go into next week's episode where I'll speak to people that maybe have a smaller weight loss goal or don't have a weight loss goal at all. But the last thing I'll say for people who do have the bigger weight loss goal is really spend a little bit of time reflecting on this year and previous years, like on your dieting history as a whole. If you're someone who hasn't really found their successful diet, you don't know much about flexible dieting, deficit, all of that, like this way that I'm speaking and this shit that I'm posing is quite new to you. It's so common to have gone through so many shitty diets and just feel like, fuck, dieting is shit and it's miserable and it's just a nightmare. When we can find our effective deficit and enjoy flexible dieting and really find that sweet spot, it actually can be a sweet spot. So reflect on shit that might not have worked for you and really think, okay, I've tried random shitty diets, maybe low carb, keto, paleo, whatever the fuck people are doing, cutting out all these food groups. It hasn't worked that well. Let it go and be open-minded to doing something different. On the flip side, if you are someone who has done flexible dieting and knows your deficit and knows all these things, I think it can be really common to have, and I say this with love and respect, but this is just something to think about, fucked around a little bit at times during the year. Now you're in a position where it actually makes sense to go to maintenance, have the diet break, etc., and you don't want to do it because you feel like you're not where you want to be. I think it's important to reflect on, was there times in the year where I did kind of fuck around, I didn't make the most of weeks or months that I could have, and no shame, it is what it is. I'm not judging and you shouldn't be judging yourself, but we want to acknowledge it and go, did I kind of twiddle my thumbs and fuck around in some weeks that I actually could have really taken advantage of, used to my advantage and moved in the direction I want to go? Now I'm in a position where it would actually make sense to shift my focus. I don't want to shift it because I'm not in the position I want to be in because I didn't make the most of the weeks that I could have made the most of. That's just an important thing to reflect on and then think, okay, what can I learn from that? How can I take that into next year? Have a bit more of a plan, have those very intentional times of dieting towards fat loss, have the intentional flexibility diet breaks, all of those things, so I don't find myself in that position again. I think this is such a great time to just really look back over the year and maybe the last few years, whatever position you're in, and go, what has worked, what has not, and what can I learn from what has not? I'm going to wrap up this episode here, and then I'm going to go, like I said, into next week's episode. I'm going to speak to people in a little bit of a different position, but I hope that was helpful, and I just think there's so much for people in this position to really think about now as we head into the last few weeks of the year and as we head into 2025. And obviously the last thing I'm going to say is, if you're in this position and you can relate to everything I just said, I'd absolutely love to have you in the fat loss phase. Like I said, stay tuned over the next few weeks. We've got a few of our fat loss phase girls coming onto the pod. They can confirm so much of what I just said. And these are girls that have absolutely had success, but they've also had trial and error. They've also had bad days, bad weeks, etc. I'm not going to sit here and promise people that everything's all happy days, but if you listen to the episodes with these girls, you'll absolutely hear that if you're willing to embrace all this stuff, embrace some change, be open-minded and do the work, you can absolutely have a fucking fantastic year in 2025, and you can have a fantastic year in the Eat Like Ruby Fat Loss phase if you feel like all of this resonates with you and you are keen to get after it in 2025. Thank you guys so much. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll be back for episode 101. And I'm literally just going to pick up where I left off and keep this going for all of my gals who are in a bit of a different position. So I'll be back next week.